Have you ever stood in front of someone who quietly wished for your downfall, yet you felt no anger, only a strange pull to defend yourself, to prove something, to fight back, even when you knew it would cost your peace? Enemies rarely arrive with noise. They slip in through doubt, pride, and wounded ego. But there is another way to face them. Stay with me, and we'll walk into it together. As we step into this first chapter, imagine a quiet room where the lights are low and your own heartbeat sounds louder than the world outside. That is where every real battle begins. Not in the streets, not in the arguments, not in the eyes of the person who wants to see you fall. It begins inside you, in the place no one else can see. Now picture this. Someone throws a sharp comment at you. Not loud, but precise. It slips under the skin, stirs your blood, makes your chest tighten, and before you can think, something in you wants to rise, to defend, to react. We've all been there, that flash of heat, that urge to strike back. But the Stoics understood a truth most people never consider. The first enemy is never the one standing in front of you. It is the one rising within you. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that the mind becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. And if you've lived long enough, you know how fast a single emotion can stain an entire day. One spark, one word, one careless look. That's all it takes for your inner world to shift from steady to storming. And when that happens, the real danger is not outside. It is the chaos you allow inside. I remember watching a man, let's call him Adrian, get blindsided by an insult during a meeting. Nothing dramatic, just a subtle jab from someone who clearly envied him. But Adrian reacted instantly, raised his voice, defended himself, tried to reclaim respect through noise. I saw the shift in the room. Not toward him, but away from him. His words were sharp, but his loss of control was sharper. He didn't lose because he was wrong. He lost because he fought the wrong battle. He handed his mind to the very person trying to provoke him. And that is the trap. The enemy outside rarely needs to defeat you. They just need to lure you into defeating yourself. Here's where Stoicism becomes more than old philosophy. It becomes a living weapon. Epictetus reminded his students that no one can hurt you unless you allow them to. Not because pain isn't real, but because reaction is a choice. And once you understand that, you start to see something powerful. Most people aren't trying to destroy you, they're trying to disturb you. And disturbance only works when your inner walls are thin. Think of your mind as a fortress, not built of stone, but of habits. The way you breathe when you're angry, the way you pause before speaking, the way you refuse to let someone else's impulse become your own. These small disciplines become the shield you carry even when you look unarmed. I learned this the hard way. Years ago, someone I trusted tried to humiliate me in front of others. It was subtle, disguised as a joke, but calculated. My first instinct was fire. My second was silence. And in that pause, I felt something shift. The Stoics were right. Power isn't always in the strike. Sometimes it's in the refusal to be moved. I looked at him, calm, not cold, just centered, and I said nothing. The room waited for a conflict that never came, and the moment passed, but the lesson stayed. Sometimes the greatest outsmarting is simply not playing the game. When you don't react, your enemy can't read you. When you stay composed, their strategy loses direction. When you remain grounded, their attempt to disrupt you collapses on itself. Calmness isn't silence. It's a decision, the kind that turns chaos into something too small to move you. But let's be honest. Calmness isn't natural. It is trained, it is sharpened, It is built like muscle, slowly, painfully, repeatedly. There will be days when your emotions roar louder than wisdom. Days when the old instincts try to drag you back into the fire. That's normal. The Stoics never preached perfection. They preached practice. So start small. When someone cuts you off in traffic, observe the rise of irritation, but don't feed it. When a coworker dismisses your idea, notice the sting, but don't let it drive your response. When someone tries to provoke you, remember that silence is a strategy, not a surrender. You win the outer battle by mastering the inner one first. Always. Adrian eventually learned this too. Months later, after one humiliating outburst too many, he came to a realization. Every time he reacted, he wasn't fighting his enemy, he was fighting himself, and he was losing. So he changed. He built pauses into his day. He read the Stoics every morning. He learned to hold his center even when others tried to shake it. And slowly, people who once saw him as volatile began to see him as unshakable. Mastery is not about being perfect. It is about being aware. From here, we step deeper into the art of outsmarting without conflict, not by force, but by clarity. Because once your inner battlefield is steady, the outer one becomes far easier to navigate. This is where the real strategy begins. Moving into the second chapter, imagine a path narrowing into a single stretch of road, where every step feels like it could trigger something you can't take back. A place where tension hangs in the air, like invisible wires waiting to be touched. This is the terrain where reactions are born, where instincts flare before thought has time to catch up, and where the smallest misstep can turn a simple moment into a lasting wound. And it is here, on this quiet road inside us, that the Stoics learn to walk differently. Picture this. Someone interrupts you when you're speaking, not because they misunderstood you, but because they want to cut you off, to show the room that your voice can be ignored. You feel it right away, like a pulse rising at the wrong time. Your jaw tightens, your breath shifts. There's a flash of heat behind your ribs. It would be so easy to jump in, to force your words louder, to match their speed with your own. But this is where the Stoics whisper the truth that most people run from. The moment you react without thinking, you hand them your power, and once given, it's not easily reclaimed. Seneca once said that anger is a form of temporary madness, but he didn't mean only rage. He meant any reaction that overtakes your clarity, any impulse that turns you into a passenger inside your own mind. And if you've ever snapped back at someone only to regret it minutes later, you know exactly what he meant. Strategy collapses when emotion leads, and when strategy collapses, the enemy doesn't have to win. You lose for them. I once watched a friend, call him Marcus, fall into this trap. He was sharp, respected, thoughtful, the kind of man who usually weighed his words, but one afternoon a co-worker challenged him in front of others. The tone wasn't hostile, but it carried something worse, condescension. Marcus reacted instantly. His voice rose. His words sharpened like stones thrown too quickly. He won the argument, but lost the room. People stopped listening and started watching the reaction instead. He looked strong but felt small, and he admitted later that the hardest part wasn't what he said. It was how it felt to lose control, even for a moment. That's the quiet truth few people want to admit. Emotion might feel powerful, but it rarely leads you toward power. It leads you toward regret. So what does a Stoic do instead? They pause. A single breath, a single heartbeat, a single moment where you refuse to be dragged by the current someone else is stirring. It looks small, almost forgettable, yet that pause is the hinge on which the whole moment turns. It cuts through impulse. It cuts through illusion. It cuts through the trap that was laid for you. Epictetus taught that we are not disturbed by events, but by the judgments we form about them. And judgment can only be shaped when the mind is still enough to see the truth beneath the moment. Think of that person interrupting you. Instead of jumping in, you turn your eyes to them, calm, steady, unhurried. You wait. The silence stretches, not aggressively but intentionally, and the room shifts. Their interruption begins to look childish, not because you fought it but because you didn't. Their haste exposes itself. Your restraint becomes its own presence. And when you finally speak, your words land with the weight that silence carved for them. This is strategy, quiet, precise, controlled. Another example. A man I knew, Thomas, was always provoked by subtle digs from others. He felt the need to respond every time, afraid that silence made him look weak. But the more he responded, the more the provocations increased. Then, one day, tired of the cycle, he tried something he'd read from Marcus Aurelius. The best answer to anger is silence. Not passive silence, strategic silence. When someone mocked him during a meeting, he simply looked at them, breathed once, and continued speaking exactly where he left off. No defense, no argument, no invitation for chaos. The room took note, and the mocker, stripped of the reaction he expected, had nowhere else to go. Often, the smartest move is the one that denies your opponent a stage. This doesn't mean suppressing what you feel. Stoicism never demanded emotional exile. It demanded emotional mastery. The pause is not about hiding your reaction. It's about choosing the most effective one. And when you choose instead of react, you shape the outcome without violence, without conflict, without war. Just clarity. At this stage, think of the greatest generals who won battles without drawing the sword. That is what we're practicing here. A form of victory where both your dignity and your peace remain intact. A form where the person trying to provoke you walks away unsure of how their attempt failed. This chapter ends with a truth worth carrying forward. When you respond with strategy instead of emotion, you don't just outsmart the enemy, you outgrow them. And from here, we move into the next lesson, where every attack becomes information, and every aggressor becomes a mirror you can learn from. The real game is only beginning. Advancing to the third chapter, imagine walking into a room where someone's eyes linger on you a little too long, not with admiration, but with a quiet edge, as if they're searching for a crack in your armor. In that moment, something shifts in the air. Subtle but unmistakable, like the first cold breeze before a storm. This is where most people brace for impact. But this is also where the Stoic sees differently. Not a threat, a revelation. Think of the last time someone tried to provoke you. Maybe they questioned your competence in a meeting, or made a joke that wasn't really a joke, or dropped a comment that felt harmless to everyone else, but sliced deeper than they knew. Your first instinct is often to defend, to correct, to protect yourself from being misunderstood. But pause for a moment. What if that sting wasn't an attack? What if it was a map? Because here's the quiet truth most never realize. Every attempt to undermine you is a message about them, not you. And if you stay calm enough, still enough, attentive enough, you can read it. Seneca once wrote that no man can reveal anything about you except through himself. And if you let that sink in, you begin to understand why the Stoics saw hostility as data, not danger. When someone speaks from envy, you learn where you outshine them. When they speak from insecurity, you learn where they feel threatened. When they speak from confusion, you learn what they do not understand. Aggression is a confession dressed as offense. Now picture a man I once knew. Call him Adrian. He had a co-worker who always questioned him publicly, not aggressively, but consistently, in a way that seemed designed to poke at him. Adrian used to argue back, match point for point, trying to defend his ideas. And each time he did, the co-worker smiled, not because he won, but because Adrian reacted. One day, exhausted by the cycle, Adrian tried something different. When the co-worker challenged him, Adrian let a moment of silence settle, looked at him calmly, and asked one quiet question: "What makes you uncertain about this?" The room shifted. The co-worker hesitated. The bravado cracked. In that pause, Adrian saw something he had never noticed. The man wasn't trying to challenge him. He was trying to mask his own uncertainty by forcing Adrian to stumble first. The attack was information. And once Adrian understood that, there was nothing left to be afraid of. This is the core of the Stoic approach. You stop assuming every blow is meant to harm you. You start assuming it is meant to expose something. Their tone reveals their fears. Their words reveal their motives. Their timing reveals their intentions. Their persistence reveals their envy. Their silence reveals their weakness. And when you learn to observe instead of react, you become something they cannot easily play. You become unreadable. Epictetus taught that the wise man observes not the events themselves, but the impressions they leave behind. So the next time someone raises their voice, ask yourself, what are they trying to hide behind the noise? When they interrupt you, ask, what outcome are they trying to prevent? When they belittle you, ask, what part of them is begging not to be seen? You shift from being the target to being the observer. And in that shift, you gain an upper hand they never intended to give you. I remember once standing in a room where a man attempted to discredit me with a single sarcastic remark. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was measured, surgical. And for a split second, I felt the familiar rise of heat. But then something inside me softened. Instead of reacting, I watched him. His shoulders were tense. His eyes flickered to the others, checking for approval. His smile was thin, uncertain. In that moment, I understood. He wasn't attacking me. He was protecting himself. And suddenly the remark no longer hurt. It taught. This is the advantage of a Stoic mind. You learn to extract meaning from moments others see only as insult. You learn to watch the nature of the person rather than the shape of their words. You learn to see the wound behind the weapon. And in doing so, you keep your peace while gaining insight. But let's be clear. This isn't about becoming passive or accepting mistreatment. It's about refusing to waste your strength on battles that don't exist. When you respond with clarity rather than emotion, you strip the moment down to its truth. And truth, when revealed, loses its power to harm you. From here, carry this with you. The one who provokes you reveals more than the one who praises you. And the one who tries to shake you shows you exactly where your footing is strongest. Every attack is information. Every aggressor is a mirror. Every moment of tension is a lesson written in real time. And as we move forward, we enter the next chapter, where boundaries become the quiet walls that protect your strength without ever declaring war. Entering the fourth chapter, imagine a quiet threshold in your life, one you cross without thinking, until someone steps into it uninvited. That small pressure seems insignificant at first, but you feel it, subtle and intrusive, like a draft slipping under the door on a cold night. And this is where the Stoic lesson begins. Not with force, with space. Now imagine a moment when someone kept asking for just a little more from you, a little more time, a little more energy, a little more access, until suddenly you realized they weren't asking anymore. They were taking. We often think boundaries are built for conflict, something you raise like a shield, only when you reach a breaking point. But the Stoics saw them differently. They saw boundaries as a quiet architecture of freedom, a way of shaping your life without declaring war on anyone in it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we must stand upright, not be set upright, and those words carry weight here. A person who needs conflict to protect their dignity is already unstable. A person who can protect themselves without anger stands on solid ground. Boundaries are not walls built from bitterness. They are doors you choose to open or close with intention, and intention is power. I once knew a woman, call her Livia, whose colleague frequently leaned on her for help. At first, she didn't mind. A small task here, a tiny favor there. But slowly, the requests grew, and the tone shifted. It was no longer, "Could you help me?" It became, "You'll handle this, right?" The boundary wasn't destroyed in one moment. It was worn down grain by grain. And Livia, wanting to avoid conflict, said yes again and again until her work piled up and her resentment grew. But one afternoon, something changed. As the colleague dropped another stack of files on her desk, Livia felt that internal tightening, the same one we all feel when someone crosses a line we never clearly drew. Instead of snapping or explaining or defending, she breathed deeply and remembered a line from Epictetus, "No person is free who is not master of themselves." She looked at the colleague and said calmly, "Not this time. No justification, no apology, no lecture. Just a clear line drawn with steady hands." The colleague stood there surprised, waiting for anger, waiting for guilt, waiting for something to push against. But nothing came. Livia had given him no chaos to feed on. Boundaries don't require rage. They require clarity, and clarity is unprovocable. The next day, the colleague tried again, softer this time. When she repeated the same quiet refusal, the dynamic shifted. He found someone else to lean on. The pressure on her doorway stopped. Her peace returned not with confrontation, but with a steady refusal to carry what wasn't hers. This is the heart of Stoic boundaries. You don't close the world out. You close disorder out. You don't block people. You block behavior. You don't withdraw from life. You withdraw from things that drown your purpose. A boundary is not a punishment. It is a declaration of what you will and will not allow to shape you. And here's where the real strength lies. When you set boundaries without anger, you confuse people who rely on emotional reactions to maintain control. They don't know how to read calm refusal. They don't know how to counter quiet firmness. They don't know how to navigate a person who cannot be guilted, rushed, or emotionally pulled. Silence becomes strategy. Composure becomes defense. And distance becomes the shield that never needs to be lifted. Think of a time someone tried to drag you into an argument you didn't start. The more you explained yourself, the deeper you were pulled. But what happened the moment you stopped explaining? The moment you stopped engaging? The moment you simply said, "This doesn't belong to me," and stepped back? The argument lost its fuel. The fire burned out. Peace returned. That is the Stoic boundary, a refusal to fight battles that don't deserve your strength. Seneca warned that life is not short, but we make it so by wasting it. And nothing wastes life more quietly than letting others chip away at your time and your energy. So you guard them, not by shouting, but by choosing. choosing where your presence goes, choosing who has access to you, choosing how deeply you allow others to pull you into their storms. Boundaries built through Stoic clarity are invisible to most people. They look gentle, but they are immovable, and when you learn to hold them, you no longer fear those who push against you. They push, you remain, they test, you observe, they demand, you decline. There is no fight to win because there is no fight to enter. That is real power. And as we move forward, this brings us to the next chapter, where the unexpected becomes your advantage and kindness, delivered at the right moment, becomes the one move your enemy never sees coming. Now imagine stepping into the 5th chapter, where the air feels strangely still, as if the world is waiting for a reaction you no longer intend to give. A place where your enemies brace for your anger, but instead meet something they never prepared for. This is where the ground shifts. And this is where the Stoic finds an advantage hidden in plain sight. Here's where the story deepens. Think of a moment when someone tried to provoke you hard. Maybe they mocked you in front of others. Maybe they questioned your worth. Maybe they tossed a comment meant to bruise your pride just enough to pull you into their game. You could feel the instinct rise inside you like a spark catching dry wood. The room waited for your fire. Everyone expected you to snap. But imagine instead responding with a calm that leaves them pausing, unsure where the ground went beneath their feet. And imagine adding something even stranger. Kindness, not weakness, precision. Seneca said that to win without conflict is the highest achievement of reason, and that kind of winning rarely comes from force. It comes from offering an unexpected gesture in a moment designed for tension, an act that exposes the other person's motives without you ever lifting a blade. I once witnessed this in a small cafe where a man, call him Silas, was berated publicly by someone who clearly wanted a scene. The accuser raised his voice. Insults spilled like arrows aimed to pierce Silas' dignity. But instead of reacting with anger, Silas did something remarkable. He looked at the man with steady eyes and said, "You must be having a hard day. Let me buy you a coffee." He stood up, walked to the counter, and placed the order without rushing, without sarcasm, without performance. The room froze. The attacker froze. The energy that had filled the space just seconds earlier dissolved, as if someone had cut the strings holding the moment upright. The aggressor muttered something under his breath and left, but no one remembered his words. They remembered Silas's composure. His calmness became the story. His unexpected kindness became the lesson, and his lack of hostility became the victory. This is not the kindness of submission. This is the kindness of strategy, a stoic kind of kindness that disarms because it does not react, does not mirror, does not feed the conflict. It confuses the aggressor because it removes the battle they came to fight. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often, "The best revenge is not to become like your enemy," and there is wisdom in that line deeper than its simplicity. When you answer hostility with hostility, you become predictable. But when you answer hostility with generosity, calm, measured, intentional, you reveal the other person to themselves. You strip their anger of its purpose. You expose the emptiness behind their attack. This doesn't mean you let people mistreat you. Stoic kindness is not offering your cheek to be struck twice. It is offering your mind to remain unshaken. It is offering your enemy a reflection so clear that their intentions become embarrassing even to them. And it is offering yourself a victory that neither humiliates nor wounds you. Think of another story. A colleague of mine, call her Mira, was constantly targeted by someone jealous of her rising influence. Little jabs, cold tones, subtle attempts to undermine her. One day during a meeting, the person made a pointed remark about her competence. It was designed to sting. Everyone looked at Mira, waiting for the reaction. Instead, she turned to him and said gently, "Thank you for pointing that out. If there's anything specific you think I could improve, I'd be glad to hear it after the meeting." There was no sarcasm, no challenge, no retreat, just openness, delivered with a confidence that made the attacker shrink in his chair. He never challenged her publicly again. Why? Because her response turned the spotlight onto his deeper intention. It exposed the pettiness behind his comment. It embarrassed him without Mira ever raising her voice. And it reminded the room of something we often forget. Kindness, when it is intentional, can be sharper than anger. This approach is not easy. It requires emotional discipline. It demands awareness. It calls for calmness, as deliberate as a blade held steady in the hand of someone who knows exactly what they're doing. But the reward is unmatched. You protect your peace, you protect your strength, and you protect your dignity without leaving a trail of unnecessary wounds behind you. At this stage, understand this clearly. Unpredictable kindness is not about pleasing others. It is about outsmarting the moment. It is about refusing to let anger choose your next step. And it is about creating a shift so subtle yet so powerful that your enemy cannot match it. And as we close this chapter, hold this truth. The blow they expect from you is the one they prepared for. The kindness you choose instead is the one they fear. And from here, we step into the final chapter, where you become untouchable, not by fighting back, but by becoming someone no hostility can penetrate. From here, as we step into the final chapter, imagine climbing a long stone staircase at dawn, each step carrying you higher above the noise below, until the voices of those who once provoked you fade into something distant and unimportant. The air becomes clearer, your thoughts become steadier, and suddenly you realize a truth that arrives not with force, but with quiet certainty. You don't have to defeat your enemies. You only have to become someone they can no longer touch. Now, picture a moment when someone tried to stir you, to tug at your pride, to pull you down into the same emotional mud they stood in. Maybe it was a subtle insult. Maybe it was a deliberate attempt to embarrass you, or maybe it was the kind of hostility wrapped in politeness that only reveals itself when you replay the moment later. We all know that feeling, the sting, the urge, the impulse to prove something. But imagine again that staircase. Imagine looking down not with arrogance, but with distance. Their words can't reach you if you're standing on higher ground, and higher ground is not a place you climb to with ego, it's a place you build inside yourself. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If you choose pettiness, you shrink. If you choose anger, you burn. But if you choose steadiness, you rise. Being untouchable is not about hiding from the world. It is about refusing to be shaped by its hostility. I once knew a man named Cassian who understood this better than most. He worked in a company where quiet rivalry ran deeper than the desks arranged in neat rows. One co-worker in particular always tried to undermine him. Small comments during meetings, strategic interruptions, subtle attempts to claim credit. But Cassian never fought back. Not once. He didn't roll his eyes. He didn't defend himself. He didn't try to expose the attacker. Instead, he kept doing excellent work, carried himself with composure, and stayed unmoved by the swirls of negativity around him. At first, people mistook his calm for weakness, but that changed, because while his rival exhausted himself in petty maneuvers, Cassian remained constant, unshaken, steady like a pillar no storm could bend. And the more the rival tried to provoke him, the more desperate he appeared. Eventually, the room itself began to see the contrast. One man trying endlessly to cause disruption, the other radiating an inner stability that needed no defense. Without raising a voice or pointing a finger, Cassian exposed the truth simply by not participating in the chaos. And the rival, deprived of any reaction, slowly lost influence. When Cassian finally earned a promotion, no one was surprised. He had already risen long before the title arrived. This is what it means to be untouchable, not invincible, not superior, simply unmoved. Your inner life becomes a fortress built through discipline and clarity. People can knock at the walls, but they cannot step inside unless you open the gate. Epictetus taught that we should act always as if the world were watching. He didn't mean living for approval. He meant living with integrity so solid that even in private, your decisions sharpen you rather than weaken you. Untouchable people don't pretend to be calm. They practice being calm. They don't fake dignity. They build it. They don't shield themselves with pride. They shield themselves with principle. At this stage, understand something essential. Many people think power comes from domination or confrontation, but those are brittle forms of power. They crack the moment someone refuses to engage. Real power is quiet. Real power is consistent. Real power is a refusal to descend. And when you become steady inside, something interesting happens. Enemies lose interest. Manipulators lose leverage. People who once fed on your reactions drift toward others who still bleed energy at every provocation. Your silence stops being a retreat. It becomes a mirror, forcing others to confront themselves. Think about the last time you walked away from something that once consumed you. Maybe it was a feud. Maybe it was a toxic dynamic. Maybe it was a person who thrived on making you uncomfortable. Do you remember how light it felt when you realized you no longer cared? That is the freedom Stoics fought for, not through swords, but through self-command. Untouchable is not coldness, it is clarity. Untouchable is not distance, it is direction. Untouchable is not pride, it is peace. And as we close this final chapter, let this remain with you. Winning doesn't always require a victor. Sometimes the victory is simply not becoming what the moment tried to turn you into. Sometimes the triumph is walking away with your inner world intact. Sometimes the greatest outsmarting is rising so far above conflict that the people who tried to pull you down can no longer reach where you stand. The conflict dies the moment you refuse to breathe life into it. And now, with this foundation built, we step into what comes next. The art of living with a calm so steady that no enemy, no provocation, no storm can break the ground beneath your feet. When you choose clarity over conflict, you step into a quiet power few ever learn to hold. If this message stayed with you, consider subscribing so we can keep walking this path together. Share your thoughts below with quiet strength to anchor the lesson. Remember, you are strongest when you stay centered. Take this calm with you and meet me in the next journey where we go even deeper.